Okay, this is Irreversible Damage, Chapter 10, subtitled The Regret. This chapter covers the detransitioners, the FtM detransitioners, who, as far as their transition goes, it went from mildly to kind of barely being on testosterone to a full-on hysterectomy. Abigail immediately introduces the reader to Ben, or GNC Centric, who I've mentioned before in previous videos, and I have her linked on my channel because I really admire her work and what she has to say. And she told Abigail that she believes that the trans community is, for the most part, a cult. Even though I never personally joined the community and thus never experienced anything of what she experienced, I certainly do believe her, though. And the problem with cults, I realize when the word is mentioned, people get offended by that because they're like, hey, wait, I'm not part of a cult. How dare you suggest that I'm part of one? Cults are evil. But the troubling thing about cults is that, like, you never know when you're in one until you're making your escape. From what I know on cults, how they recruit people is either A, raising that person into being one of them from the cradle. So, when they're first born, they like start indoctrinating them immediately. Or B, or the other one being after you've suffered tragedy as like a kid or a teenager, or sometimes even just adults as well. After you've suffered tragedy, abuse, or are just particularly vulnerable for whatever reason that is. In the latter case, they leverage your vulnerability and gaslight you into running away from home and not trusting anyone in your life. Typically, the modus operandi, the MO, for transgender conversion is reeling in depressed and socially anxious teenagers or kids who don't have a secure attachment to their parents/family and don't exactly fit in with gender stereotypes or, their peers. For me personally, I simply absorbed the identity while reading about it, and I never actually talked with anyone. But I had all the key components of being depressed, anxious, had an anxious attachment to my family, and was pretty gender nonconforming. And I had trouble socially in school. For Ben, though, she had all of that in an abusive family. And I want to point out that when it comes to an abusive family, you don't really tend to understand what like actual love looks like. So when a cult comes along, they try to show you some weird level of love, and because that abused kid or that person with the abused background is like, oh, then that must be love, so of course I'm gonna you know bite that hook. And that's really important here, for at least for Ben. The point of origin for conversion usually is Tumblr and YouTube, and at the age of 13, Ben discovered trans men, or otherwise labeled trans-identified females. When she came out on Tumblr as trans-identified, being uncomfortable in her body, she found the identity to be enrapturing and a perfect escape from girlhood. She received an overwhelming love bombing from strangers. And this is what I meant by the love sort of thing. They try to show you a different kind of, like a really false type of love, but they don't recognize what love really is. So they think, oh, this is great, this is amazing, I'm being loved for who I really am. But it's love bombing is an abusive tactic where they try to show you all this fake love to reel you in. Like, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so amazing, in this case, your new trans name is so amazing, it's so cute, blah, blah, blah. You know, just fake bullshit that is meaningless. When I was on Tumblr, however, like, I never did that. I never said, "Hey everybody, I'm trans." I kept it mostly to myself. I never came out like Ben did. It was more like just passive information. Sometimes I would post pictures. I remember posting one picture of me being like really moody and going, ugh, and like having the camera up here and going, ugh, and wearing my binder. I don't think I was wearing a shirt. I might have been, I don't know. I think I had first gotten it, so I was like, ooh, I gotta show other people. And that got some traction, but not like an overwhelming amount. I never directly said I'm trans. What I basically did was I was so keen on just being male. I didn't like the trans thing. I just wanted to be male, pure and simple. And male meant I don't need to be hanging out and communing with other trans people, because, like, why would I want to hang out with trans people when I could just hang out with other guys? That was the logic in my head. And online, I just was just like, well, I'm just a guy, so I'm on Tumblr. That was it. Like, just trans was not part of my thing. But for Ben, it was, can't speak for her, but it seems like it was just like, I'm gonna come out as this because I want to make connections with these other people and probably be part of a community or something. When she came out and stuff, she came up with, or she was met with so much positive reinforcement that she was hoodwinked into thinking nothing bad could happen if she continues down the path, because all they were doing is saying just how positive and wonderful transition is, being trans identified and transitioning. It's all good. There's nothing bad about it. There's no risks. There's nothing heinous or horrible about it. It's just go, go, go. And so she made a bunch of friends, and she believed these people were her real friends. Even the ones who were adults, trans identified adults, online, she felt freer and without anxiety. If she ever lost her phone or her parents removed her phone from her, she would have a breakdown because she was completely dependent on her online friends. And then what she describes next really creeps me out, and I really hate it. I hate pedophiles. You have to have extreme hatred for yourself to be like, oh, let's sext. And that's what they would do. And it's always men. It is always these trans-identified men who come along and they're like, oh gosh, send me a picture of your your dingy. Your trans vagina. Oh god, I'm making light of that, but it is very disgusting. When they would request her to sext with them, she, as most teenagers would, especially ones who've been in an abusive household, they'd be like, I am too people pleasing, I am too naive to say, no, I'm not gonna do that, that's fucking creepy, you're a creep and a criminal. And one of the things that also really just grind my gears, if you will, is when these trans-identified men are like, ooh, I'm so much of a victim. Oh, look at me, I'm trans. And, oh, but I'm also a woman. And, and oh gosh, I'm just so relatable. Relate to me, little girl. Ah, I hate it. That's what pedophiles always do. They always just go like, ah! You know, I have a wife, and we just don't have we don't have bedroom stuff. Our bedroom's dead, and I'm such a weak and pathetic fool. It's just like that's just what they do. They like all kind of do it. They're like always down on their luck in some sort of way. They're pretty much just overall losers. And I would recommend the channel, actually. whatever his channel is called. I can't remember what it is, but I really admire him. He's just like this 27-year-old dude, and he pretends to be like a teenager or a little boy online so he can reel in predators, and sends his findings to the police. I really recommend checking that guy out. He knows what pedophiles do, what their sort of MO sort of is, their approach toward little kids. I would recommend going to his channel. I really like him. So another thing about pedophiles is that like they are so extremely insecure that if in this case Ben would be like she would display any sort of doubt, like, oh, maybe I don't want to do this sexy thing. I don't think I really want to do that. I don't think I'm comfortable. They would do this just they would do this thing where they would just be like, Ben, you're kink shaming me. You're kink shaming me. How dare you? And kink shaming is, well, I mean, it is a method of reducing and removing the shame associated with any kind of sexual expression. And I do agree that there should be less shame in your sexual expression for the most part, whatever that is. But it's not kink shaming when you're talking with a little girl, an underage girl or boy, and what you want from them is just to, like, what, do touch your willy. Being a pedophile is not a kink. Stop it. When she would assert a sexual boundary, uh, these disgusting pedophiles would say, "Oh, well, you're just being a trans oppressor. You're being transphobic right now." Like, you do realize that you're being a fucking pedophile, right? It's not transphobic oppression when you're going around pretending to be a woman and then trying to get into the pants of underage girls. Like, what's wrong with you? I got a bone to pick with transphobic oppression because, like, you're the one guilting this underage girl who doesn't know any better in, into touching your wang. You're the one who's oppressing her. You're victimizing her with your stupid, non-disciplined sexual urges. Like, you can't control yourself, and therefore you're oppressing her with these things. And, pressuring her into doing what you want. She's the victim here. She's being oppressed, not you. And nobody wants to be a victim, right? And yet these sorts of trans-identified people bask in the murky glory of victimhood status and gaslight others into getting their way, and it's fucking disgusting. And I mention this stuff because this is what abusers also do, especially depending on the kind of abuser. Like if they have narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, they kind of, well, they full-blown secretly delight in your demise. They want to see you fall. They want to see you fail. And when they see you fail, especially if they've set you up to fail, they want to take advantage of you being even more depressed and anxious. And so they'll bring up, positive reinforcements. Like, oh, I appreciate you. I think you're a great person. Stuff that's just like, oh, I love you. You're great. You know, or maybe in a friendship way. I love you as a friend, blah, blah, blah. They'll say these things. That way the victim can be like, oh, you actually care about me. You're the real deal. You're the only person who really cares about me. And so you get closer to the abuser. They also encourage you to leave home, go no contact. That way there's no chance you'll be fed ideas that go against their vile intentions. And that's what happened to Ben. She thoroughly believed they had her best interest at heart, as her parents did not show that they could be trusted. They insisted that, quote, you can't trust cis people, you can only trust trans people. They tell you that you cannot emotionally or psychologically depend on your family or any cis-hets or non-queer people because they can't possibly understand you or empathize with you or love you for who you really are. Which, when I read that, it was funny because every single trans-identified person heavily relies on the acceptance of the cishet scumbags in order to make way in politics as well as obtain medical treatment. And I think it's really just bullshitty to be like, oh, well, I can't trust you, so I'm going to lie and cheat and steal from the cishets so that I can get my way. And then when I get my way, bon voyage, I'm leaving, suckers. Like, maybe you need to learn to coexist instead of alienating yourself. I don't know. It's an idea. It's kind of novel, I think. And then, not only that, but it's funny because if you aren't in full compliance to their ideology, they will no longer love you for who you really are either. So it's just like, if you're complying fully to what their ideology is, then, well, of course I love you for who you really are. But then once you turn around and go, actually, I don't think, I'm not really resonating anymore with this whole trans thing. And then they go, how dare you? I don't love you for who you really are. This is gross. It's not what I wanted. Ben's trans identification left her feeling increasingly more depressed and dysphoric as time went on. Something the community would never address, but reinforced the idea that she just needs to keep going, that going on hormones will guaranteed reduce her problems or even fucking solve them all together. It's interesting when Ben went to her therapist asking for coping mechanisms, quote, for dealing with her dysphoria as a next best alternative because she didn't want to be on hormones while she was with her parents because they would obviously notice and do something transphobic. Her therapist at the time was like, well, we only put people on testosterone. What are you talking about? There's other options, dude. Which goes to show, for me at least, that these people have no clue what transgenderism even is. They're just following orders, higher ups' orders. That's it. Because, if they really did, they would say, oh, well, why don't we do this, that, the other? Let's do XYZ. Let's do this alternative thing. Let's actually help you. But instead, because there seems to be only one way to treat gender dysphoria, that's all they're going to recommend ever. And I like that Ben says, or argues, that there needs to be varying options for each degree of gender dysphoria, which, because there's different types, for the milder ones, just have therapy, and for the more extreme cases, whatever that looks like, I guess extreme would be it's lasted for 20 plus years, and it's never gone away, I guess you would do medical transition. I also liked it when she points out the addiction toward testosterone. It's not a literal physical addiction to testosterone itself. It's the positive chemical cocktail that goes in your brain that you've kind of constructed in your head that this stuff is good, and your friends like that you're on it, and you have made yourself believe that this is exactly what you need and it'll solve all your problems. And so when you first take it, you're on this euphoric joyride. Ben points out, quote, a lot of people build it up in their minds for so long, like multiple years before they actually get it. And then once they get it, they're like, wow, this must be great. And then when they inject it, they get a sense of euphoria, unquote. And I would say for me, that's definitely my experience with testosterone. I didn't build it up for years. I definitely built it up for like 1 year at most. And I was extremely euphoric and amazed. Like, I loved all the changes. I was keeping track of them like every day, or at least, or maybe at the most every week. And then the euphoria finally wore off after about a year, and I feel like, as any addicted person would behave, I wanted to go more extreme because testosterone wasn't doing it alone. I felt I needed to go onto surgeries, and I was eyeballing top surgery for quite a while there. And Abigail brings up another detransitioner named Erin to attest to this addiction. Erin began T in her like mid to late 20s, it seems like. At this time, I guess, it was kind of unclear to me how it was worded, but it seems like she was gender dysphoric for a while, and then by the time she actually got onto to testosterone, she wasn't really feeling gender dysphoric anymore because I guess she was starting to desist in a way, but she was still identifying as transgender. But then her community pressured her to take testosterone and would bring testosterone to her, which is just sounds really grossly irresponsible, especially if they're just like, here, just take my testosterone. I mean, when you go into, your doctor's office who's prescribing you testosterone, they are doing it based on what your body could hypothetically take, because you have no idea how their body is going to react. Because what if you have a different blood level or whatever? Maybe you can take on more testosterone, but this younger woman can't. This made her realize that, quote, she would never be fully accepted as a member of the transgender community without it, which is testosterone, unquote. Uh, Testosterone, however, made Erin feel nauseous, cloudy-headed, and angry, but her trans friends would just suggest to her, hey, just take more, bruh. It'll make you feel better, bruh. Quote, even though it was making her feel sick, a couple of months after taking it, she would be thinking about it all day and be like, I can't wait to put it on the gel when I get back home. She just got obsessed with it, unquote. For Ben, binders worsened her asthma, testosterone worsened the chronic pain in her arm, and worsened her severe digestive problems, all making her leery of taking testosterone, which that's what addiction does to you. You get so obsessed with just, oh, well, I feel good on this drug. I don't care if it's literally killing me. I don't care because I like this other positive feeling that it's giving me. With the pressure that Erin was talking about, with the trans community would never fully accept her unless she was on testosterone, that sort of thing. And also what I was saying before with you have to completely be in compliance to the ideology, otherwise you'll lose support from these people. When Ben, quote, tried to follow a gay man on social media whose bio indicated that he was a homosexual, not homogenderal, meaning that he didn't buy into gender ideology, unquote, meaning, like, altogether, he is not attracted to women no matter how masculine they look, period, so he would never date a trans man because he's not attracted to gender, he's attracted to men. And trans men aren't men. That's his point. And so when Ben befriended this person and she was so willing to listen to an opposing voice, a voice outside the echo chamber, that meant trouble for her. A friend of hers, like a member of the Gestapo, trying to find hidden Jews, noticed Ben's activity. And I say that to emphasize the fact that it's fucking creepy and weird to be like, ooh, what's your followers list? Ooh, I need to check. Like, who does that? Why would anybody else ever check your followers list? Why would it matter? It's just, it's weird to just be like, ooh, Ben, who are you following? Who are you interacting with online? It better not be a gay man! She noticed Ben's activities, snapped a screenshot of the followers list, and, you know, they mutually followed each other, Ben and this guy. And she posted this online to inform the rest of the cult, which is what cult members do when they see that you're doing no good, or if they accidentally did no good, they always report it back to the rest of the cult, and they'll either apologize profusely for their actions, you know, confess their sins, or when it comes to somebody else who's been sinning, they go to their other cult members and they're like, oh my god, did you see what Susie did? She did this thing and it was not what we do. We have to do something about it. So this friend implored all these other cult members to cancel Ben and block her. Ben ended up being on 125 Twitter users block list. Ben, still yearning to be part of this cult, confronted the naysayer, the guy that we mentioned, to let him know what he had indirectly done to her. And I like that he didn't succumb to her anger, and instead he actually continued to fight back and said, quote, if you talk to these people, what they have to say to you will make you suicidal. You will lose your identity, and you will literally die if you talk to these people, unquote. I like this a lot because it's just so telling on, like, the book wasn't really going in this direction, but for me, I was like, whoa, because it's not that identifying as trans make you suicidal, it's the thoughts that these ideologues stuff inside your impressionable head that makes you suicidal. It's like you join the cult and they want you to be suicidal almost, in a way. So the turning point for Ben on when she wanted to detransition and get away from the cult was when she visited her gay male friend who was suffering from leukemia, and he had to do a bunch of like procedures and like bone marrow transplant and all this fun and crazy stuff. He told her, quote, I'm literally going to die if I don't have this medical procedure. Why would you put yourself in the position to be under the knife and under anesthesia with all these possible complications when you're not literally going to die from having breasts, unquote. This really hit home for her, not only because of what he said, but it's also like he experienced gender dysphoria as well, but I guess he got over it. And because of that sort of bond that they had in that way, Ben really trusted this guy's words. It's like, this is actually coming from a place of your own experience. So after this inspired Ben to enter the community of gender-critical radical feminists and lesbians. She accepted that she's lesbian, and she's not less of a woman for being attracted to other women and failing femininity tests. Ben's the one, for me, who solidified the idea that internalized homophobia and internalized misogyny is very real, and it adds to the urge to transition. Her and another detransitioner, KJ, both of them made me realize that gender dysphoria does not necessitate being trans-identified. You can have gender dysphoria and not be trans. And when I heard that, it just seemed so novel to me. I thought you needed gender dysphoria to be trans. Finally, when she escaped the cult and announced that she's a woman, the cult members, quote, dismissed her desistance and claimed it proved she was never really trans, unquote. And I know that these people will always say that to other detransitioners, oh, well, you weren't really trans. But the thing is, like, I don't think these people even know what true trans is. I've never seen a trans person exactly defined what a true trans person really is. Like, how do they know that she was truly trans while she was even in the community. I made a video a couple months ago, I think, on detransitioning and it being seen as either rare or almost non-existent, and in the book, the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria does not include in remission or any kind of remission, and thus Dr. Blanchard points out, quote, there is no apparent way to record a detransition patient for clinical or research purposes, unquote. Therefore, because no official study or statistics are being made, the trans community cannot easily access the fact that people desist and detransition. Therefore, it's seen as rare. And it's all an illusion for them. And they always express so much doubt that, like, oh, well, you don't have any numbers, so therefore it must be fake. And it's just like, you can't always exclusively rely on medical stuff. And you really can't in this case because there is no in remission for the DSM-5, so nobody is going to be counting. Like, my doctor very likely didn't count when I said, hey, I don't want to be trans anymore, so I'm going to get off testosterone now. I'm sure he didn't go like, oh, well, that's a detransitioner right there. Let's, you know, put the tally on the wall and show how many detransitioners there are. Like, why would they do that? They don't account for it. Abigail moves on to another detransitioned woman named Helena, who founded the Pique Resilience Project, and I'll try to find it and like link it and stuff. She, like everyone else in the book, had a tough relationship with her parents. Around the 8th grade, her social status began to crumble as her friends were going through puberty and taking interest in boys, makeup, Instagram, and the latest fashion trends, things that Helena just had no interest for. She became the social pariah, and this led her to anorexia and hating other girls, which I can relate to, except for the anorexia part. Through social justice blogs online, which apparently she didn't take very seriously in the beginning. She thought they were just kind of silly. She eventually discovered transgenderism. She deeply empathized with the trans testimonials she watched on YouTube, which I can also relate to. That's what I did as well. Soon enough, she felt she didn't believe she was female. Actually, I relate to this a lot. She didn't believe she was female, but not necessarily a guy either. She got obsessed with all this trans identification stuff, and this obsession made her in particular lose friends. And when it comes to obsessions in general, usually you do tend to like lose friends. But when it comes to trans stuff in this case, she would lose friends because uh, one of her best friends was like, hey man, I'm gonna be cis now. And Helen was like, how dare you? I thought we were blood sisters. We're supposed to be doing this stuff together. Get out of my sight, sort of thing. And so she ended that friendship. But then, after, I guess, a year or something, I don't know the timeline. Later on, she regretted doing that because she realized how, like, ridiculous she was in her behavior. Like, why get angry at someone for finding who they truly are and being comfortable with themselves? Like, wow, you found who you really are. How dare you be happy in your life, The relationship with her mother strained, and her mother's refusal to participate in her addiction and obsession was actually validating to her because it reinforced Helena's view that she was oppressed, and oppression apparently means empowerment. And I can relate to this. I felt the same way, or very, very similar, with my mom and my brother not fully supporting my new false identity. Feeling like you're being oppressed like that just is just more fuel to the fire, and that's what really it motivates you to keep going, is what I'm trying to say there. As with any addiction, Helena's mental health suffered, And I'm concluding that this depression is a false positive for being trans-identified. Kind of unrelated, but I'm just hypothesizing as I'm reading. And that's where they believe surgeries might just cure them of their depression. Also, with the reinforcement of, other trans people in the community being like, oh, well, this will help you. And so they also believe that. But the reality is, as I was saying before with the homosexual, not the homogenderal, uh, the their depression is from them running further and further away from themselves, not to their true self. Hannah's turning point for her to detransition was a high school friend of hers who was also studying at the same college, quote, sent her a video montage of pictures of the two of them over the year prior, unquote. Helena, quote, looked at them and felt like, this isn't me, what have I done, unquote. She promptly decided to turn her life around, and I like it when she recounted on these people, quote, who put up a face and act like, I'm super trans, but I'm really happy about it. Their lives are actually catastrophes, unquote, once you actually talk to them. It's this habit of lying to get to hormones / surgeries that personally makes me realize that anyone who claims on a documentary, a YouTube video, or a blog post, or whatever it is, that transition is always what they needed, they're lying out their ass just as they did with their therapist and doctors. And this is what addiction and the obsession makes you do. And I know that's something very rude and horrible and disrespectful to say, but there aren't actually that many trans people, in existence. It's the whole bulk of the trans thing is just people thinking that they're trans. Abigail then recounts the turning points for various other young detransitioned women. Uh, Chiara? I don't know. Sierra? I don't know. Was forced by her mother to live without an internet, living on a horse farm for a year. The physical labor helped her to leave her prior trans identification behind. Desmond experienced uterine atrophy, underwent a hysterectomy, and woke up believing that she made a grave error. Erin experienced reverse dysphoria while presenting as male. She couldn't fit into men's clothing, and she felt like a kid trying to wear her dad's clothes. She had to alter her posture, exercise, speak a certain way, laugh a certain way, cough a certain way, anything to be seen as male, and that is mentally exhausting. And I know trans-identified men who have detransitioned and desisted experience very similar things. To conclude all this, I know I said I would stop doing conclusions, but this kind of has newer stuff in it and it's still kind of in the book. Transitioning is a type of death in that, the old you, the female you, is now gone and I'm no longer your daughter, I'm now your son. It's like that daughter is gone now, she's dead, I brutally murdered her, stuff like that. Your rite of passage is giving up your birth name and your pronouns, as well as anything that used to make you happy, because the book was also going off about hobbies, and that was very interesting to me. How it's like they would have any kind of hobby, and then once they got into the trans BS, they lost their hobbies and started only exclusively focusing on transgenderism as their hobby. Injecting yourself with something that makes you either sick now or sick later is your ticket into being true trans and accepted into the community. All your problems are solved if you just keep up your transition, and there's no need to go back because, quote, no one can be wrong about their gender identity, unquote. The entire charade builds up this illusion that if you're still sad, it's because you're gender dysphoric, oppressed by the cishets, and not at all because you're destroying yourself and gender isn't actually your problem. Abigail drives the point home that there is life after detransitioning, and you don't need to fear it. It is an option, and these people tend to just outright deny it most of the time. Anyway, so that's it. That's this chapter. Kind of made me sad. I'll catch you on chapter 11 next week, hopefully. Maybe. I don't know. Thanksgiving is coming up. Who knows? We'll see.